I woke up suddenly, not immediately understanding what had woken me. The room was dark, with only the streetlight outside casting a faint glow on the ceiling. I turned my head and looked at Mia. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady, her face relaxed, as if nothing had changed, as if everything was just as it used to be. But that was a lie. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned on the screen. Over the past few months, there had been an increase in burglaries in our neighborhood, which had forced me to install cameras all around the property: front yard, backyard, living room, hallway, kitchen. Everything looked normal. But then there was the sixth camera. I had installed it myself a few months ago, hiding it between the shelves in the garage. Back then, it had seemed like just a precaution, in case someone tried to break into the house. I had no idea that one day I would see this. I opened the recording. 11:14 p.m. Movement in the frame. I watched as the garage door slowly opened, letting in a narrow beam of streetlight. She stepped in first. The sharp outline of her figure, the familiar way she moved, the slight tilt of her head. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep watching. Then he stepped in after her. I couldn't see his face, just a dark silhouette, tall, confident, standing too close to her. They were side by side, their outlines brushing against each other. I watched as she lifted her hand, slowly running her fingers over his shoulder. He leaned in. My pulse pounded in my temples. I felt my fingers curl into a fist, my nails digging into my palm. I should have turned it off. I should have stopped watching, but I couldn't. The recording kept playing. I heard her voice, quiet, muffled. "You can't stay here for long." He said something in response, but his voice was too low, indistinct. I only saw his hand settle on her waist. I don't remember turning off the screen. Inside, everything felt hollow, like I had been burned out from within. Next to me, Mia shifted onto her other side, mumbling something in her sleep. I closed my eyes, but the darkness before me was no longer the same. I don't remember falling asleep. The last thing I saw before sinking into the dark void was the glowing phone screen, frozen on a single frame. Mia in the garage, the man standing beside her. Morning came too fast. I lay in bed, motionless, listening to the muffled sounds from the kitchen. The scent of coffee filled the air, blending with the faint trace of her perfume. Everything was normal. I turned my head and watched as Mia moved around the kitchen, setting down a cup, brushing a hand through her hair. She looked calm, too calm, as if nothing had happened. I tried to gather my thoughts. Maybe it really was a mistake? Maybe I had misunderstood something? The video was dark, the silhouettes blurred. But then why was every instinct inside me screaming that it wasn't? If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be this careful. The thought lodged itself in my mind, refusing to let go. "You sleeping in today?" Mia asked, glancing at me over the rim of her cup. I blinked. "No, I'm getting up now." She nodded and took another sip of her coffee, as if nothing had changed. But it had. I left the house earlier than usual, hoping work would distract me. But the more I tried to focus, the louder her voice from the video echoed in my head. "You can't stay here for long." I stepped outside, inhaling the crisp morning air, and walked toward my car. But before I could get in, my neighbor, Dan, called out to me. "Hey Cole, how's it going?" A casual question, a casual tone, but something inside me tightened. "All good, Dan. You?" "Great. Hey, how's Mia?" My wife and I saw her car near Black Oak around 11 last night. We were gonna say hi, but figured she was probably out with friends. I froze. Black Oak was a small bar downtown. At 11 last night, Mia was supposed to be home. At Black Oak? I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah, I even joked that you two were having a night out, but I didn't see you there." I didn't know what to say. I remembered the recording. At 11:14, she was in the garage. But before that, a cold feeling crept through my chest. I remembered how Mia had said she was tired and went to bed early. I remembered her smile at breakfast. Light, effortless, fake. "Yeah, maybe she just stopped by for something," I muttered, pretending it didn't matter. "Yeah, maybe. All right, see you around." Dan waved and walked off, leaving me standing beside my car. She had lied to me. Not just an omission, not a mistake, a lie. And now, I had my first real proof. I got into my car but didn't start the engine. A part of me wanted to brush it off as a coincidence. Maybe she really had just stopped by briefly. Maybe it was something work-related. Maybe, but I couldn't believe that. I thought of the video, of her hand resting on his shoulder. What if that man had been at Black Oak? I pulled out my phone and opened our messages. Everything looked normal. Nothing suspicious. Too clean. Too careful. As if she already knew she might get caught. I exhaled slowly. I need to find out the truth. But how? I sat at the table, watching Mia move around the kitchen. She was just like always. The same slight curve of her lips, the same habit of touching her hair when she was deep in thought, the same calm look in her eyes. But now I saw more. Every word, every pause between sentences, every time she avoided my gaze, it all formed a picture I could no longer ignore. I smiled, answered her questions, kept up the mask of normalcy. But inside, everything pulsed with tension. She's lying. Now I knew it for sure. I might be home late today, she said, placing her cup in the sink. I looked up. Work. She nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, like someone was waiting for her reply. Yeah. New project. Need to finish a few things. I nodded. She spoke with confidence, but now I heard something new in her voice. Something I hadn't noticed before. Lies. That evening, I stood by the window, watching her get into her car. Black jacket, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Nothing unusual. But I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. I waited exactly 5 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys and got into my car. My car moved slowly, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. My heart pounded too loudly, but my hands stayed steady on the wheel. I wasn't trying to reassure myself anymore. What if I'm wrong? No, I knew I wasn't wrong. She wasn't going to the office. I watched the road, counted every turn, memorized the route. She drove with certainty, without hesitation. That meant she knew exactly where she was going. When her car turned off the main road, something twisted deep inside me. Mia stopped in front of an old brick building. I turned off my headlights and parked across the street. She didn't get out right away. The light inside her car flickered on as her fingers moved over her phone screen again. I barely heard my own breathing. A minute passed, then another, and finally, her car door opened. She stepped out, shut the door, and walked toward a side entrance. I clenched my jaw. The building looked like an apartment complex. A few units, a small porch, a worn-out staircase. What are you doing here, Mia? I watched as she stopped in front of the door. And then someone met her. The door opened, and I saw him. Tall, confident. The same silhouette from the garage video. He stood in the doorway, and Mia looked at him the way she hadn't looked at me in a long time. And then, she stepped inside. The door closed. I stayed in my car. I didn't move. I didn't rush after her, didn't call her name, didn't bang on the door. I just sat there, staring at the closed entrance. Now I knew the truth. But this was only the first step. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening painfully around the wheel. Now, I would see everything for myself. I stood at the entrance, listening to my own breathing. It was too loud, too fast, as if the air had suddenly become heavier. The silence around me was unnatural, oppressive. Every tiny sound became agonizingly sharp. A car passed somewhere in the distance, but I barely registered it. My entire focus was locked onto this building. On one door. On what was behind it. I could turn around. Leave. Pretend I hadn't seen anything. Give myself one last chance not to know the truth. But my feet moved forward on their own. I climbed the stairs slowly, but with each step, the weight in my chest grew heavier. You might be wrong. This isn't what you think. You don't know for sure. My mind clung to those thoughts, grasping at them like a drowning man reaching for one last breath of air. But my heart knew the truth. My fingers curled into fists. My palms were damp. Blood pounded in my temples, so hard the world blurred at the edges. My hands trembled, but I kept moving. One step, then another. The door was right in front of me. And that's when I heard them. A woman's laughter. Her laughter. And then, A man's voice. Low, satisfied, warm. A voice I didn't recognize. Something inside me collapsed. It wasn't pain. It wasn't a blow. It was emptiness. A free fall into a void where the air thickens and time stretches until it breaks. I heard whispers, movement, a quiet gasp, and then silence. They had heard something too. Maybe my footsteps. Maybe my breath, which I could no longer control. I clenched my jaw so hard pain shot through my skull. And then I took the final step. My hand landed on the doorknob. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I just turned it and pushed forward. The door wasn't locked. It swung open instantly. And I saw them. Mia. And him. I froze. The first moment wasn't pain. It was nothing. My mind simply refused to process what I was seeing. As if I weren't standing in reality, but staring at a scene from someone else's film. She was sitting on the bed, legs pulled up, hair tousled. She was wearing a shirt, but the buttons weren't done all the way. She was looking at me, her eyes wide, the ghost of a smile still lingering on her lips, fading now, dissolving into shock. He was standing near the wall, fastening his belt. Slowly, as if he already knew I wasn't going to move. Time folded in on itself. A wave of heat seared through me, my chest tightening so painfully I could barely breathe. Blood roared in my ears, my heart hammering like it was ready to tear itself free. The words ripped from my throat before I could stop them. What the hell are you doing? Mia flinched. Cole. I took a step forward, but stopped. Her voice was small, unsteady, like she had no idea what to say. He, on the other hand, stayed calm. Relax, man, he said without even looking at me. These things happen. These things happen? A blow to the chest. Not physical, worse. As if something had been ripped out of me, leaving behind nothing but a hollow, broken shell. My fingers clenched. I could hit him. I could shatter his smug face. But I looked at her. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She wasn't crying. She was just staring. And in her eyes, there was no guilt, only fear. I turned sharply and walked out because if I stayed another second, I didn't know what I would do. The door slammed shut behind me. I stepped into the night. The air was thick, suffocating. I didn't know where to go, but I knew one thing. There was no turning back now. I had no idea how long I stood outside before the cold night air started seeping through my skin. I could still feel my pulse pounding in my temples, but it was no longer the feverish, blinding pain. Now it was steady, rhythmic, like the ticking of a clock counting down to an execution. I looked at the building in front of me. I could leave. I could erase them from my life, let them rot in their own filth. But they deserved more. My steps were no longer cautious. I didn't creep, didn't hesitate, didn't hold my breath. Let them hear me. Let them know. I wasn't leaving quietly. The door gave way under my fingers once again, and I stepped inside. The air felt different now. It was no longer laced with their secrecy, with the sickly sweet scent of betrayal. Now, it was filled with me. Mia flinched at the sound of my footsteps. She stood by the bed, hunched in on herself like a trapped animal. As for him, he was sitting at the edge of the bed, one leg crossed over the other, relaxed, smug. But when I truly stepped in, filling the room with cold, his ease faltered. Cole! Mia's voice was small, hoarse, panic in her eyes. Shut up. Her mouth snapped shut. I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. I turned to him. You're still here? He smirked. Yeah. Why wouldn't I be? You've already seen everything. I took a step forward. He tensed, just slightly. You enjoy taking what isn't yours? My voice was calm, almost lazy. Does it make you feel more like a man, stealing from others? Cole, Mia tried to interject. I didn't even glance at her. This is about you too. She fell silent. I looked back at him. Well, I tilted my head. You're a man, aren't you? Or are you just a coward hiding behind someone else's woman? I saw his jaw tighten. Cut the theatrics, he muttered. I chuckled. And you cut the bullshit. His smirk was gone. Mia took a step toward me. Cole, just listen. I looked at her. Her eyes were filled with tears. Her lips trembled, but not from regret, from fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing the way I saw her. She was terrified that I had finally seen who she really was. I nodded. Now I understand. She froze. You wanted to tell me something? I asked. Justify yourself? Lie some more? No, her voice cracked. Then don't speak. She shrank back as I let my gaze sweep across the room. You too, I exhaled slowly, are nothing. I saw her face go pale. Cole. I turned toward the door. You can't just walk away like this. Her voice rose, teetering on hysteria. I stopped, turned, met her eyes. I can do anything. I opened the door. Cole. I didn't look back. I walked out, and when the door slammed shut behind me, it wasn't a sound of anger. It was a full stop. I descended the stairs, stepping into the cold night. The air hit my face, filled my lungs. It didn't make me feel better, but it didn't hurt anymore. Only emptiness remained, but an emptiness that freed me. I took a step forward, and I never looked back. I opened my eyes. The ceiling. A faint crack in the left corner. The orange glow of dawn sliding across the wall. Silence. Not the comforting kind. Not the peaceful kind. It was an empty silence, where thoughts lay frozen, emotions suspended, a reality unbroken but already dead. I blinked. My head felt heavy, my body foreign, as if I was trapped inside a shell, performing mechanical functions without truly inhabiting it. Inhale. Exhale. I sat up, but every movement felt slow, weighed down by something thick and suffocating inside me. I should have felt something. Pain, anger, despair. But there was nothing. Only emptiness. The world around me blurred. I walked into the kitchen, took a glass of water, drank, but there was no taste. It felt like nothing more than an automatic motion, devoid of meaning, devoid of purpose. I opened the fridge, closed it. Nothing mattered. I sat at the table, running a hand down my face. Inside, I was stuck. The events of last night refused to fade, looping endlessly in my mind. I saw her eyes, wide with fear, his indifferent smirk. I heard my own voice, calm, firm, sharp as a blade. I slammed the door again. I walked into the night again. But the moment I closed my eyes, it all played back. Again, and again, and again. I clenched my hands into fists. I can forget. I can just move on. But the voice inside me was cold, ruthless. You can't. You don't get to. The pain returned, but it was no longer hot, no longer searing, tearing me apart. It had settled deeper. Why? I couldn't shake the question. Why did she do it? Why did he? Why so easily, so carelessly? I replayed the moment over and over, searching for an answer. But the longer I thought, the clearer it became. There was no answer. And that was the most terrifying truth of all. I could dig through memories, dissect the past, try to pinpoint the exact moment my world began to crack. But the why didn't matter. What mattered was what now. I let my head fall into my hands, fingers pressing against my face. And then, cutting through the gray void, came a single thought. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was pure calculation. I lifted my head slowly. What if I didn't just leave? What if I destroyed them? My thoughts sharpened, became clearer. I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't let them walk away without consequences. I wouldn't let them pretend nothing had happened. I wouldn't let them. Somewhere deep inside me, something clicked. A switch flipping. A mechanism locking into place. Control. Where there had been emptiness, now there was purpose. No more chaos. Now I was in charge. My movements were no longer mechanical. They were deliberate. I stepped onto the balcony, breathing in the crisp morning air, thick with silence. I was no longer broken. I was rebuilding. And from this moment on, their lives would never be the same. The silence in the room was heavier than lead. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my phone, but I didn't dial the number. The words were stuck in my throat. I had already survived one betrayal. I had shattered, pieced myself back together, been reborn into something colder. But this was different. Saying it out loud would mean destroying everything I had left. And yet, I dialed. Hello? His voice was calm, slightly groggy. Dan, my voice was steady. We need to talk. I didn't know where to start. This was Dan. Neighbor. Friend. The guy who lived across the street, who helped me with my car, who passed me cigars after long talks on the porch. I expected anything. Shock, anger, confusion. But not this. You mean Mia, don't you? He sighed. Everything inside me stopped. What? Cole. I didn't let him finish. You knew. 2 words. 2 blows, ripping the air from my lungs. I shot to my feet. My knees felt weak. My chest clenched, not from pain, but from pure, icy rage. Jesus, Cole. His voice tensed, defensive. It's not what you think. Not what I think. I took a step across the room, feeling my fingers curl into a fist. How long? Silence. Dan. How long? A long, agonizing pause. A couple of months. The world around me felt fake. I laughed. Not a real laugh. A sharp exhale through clenched teeth. Bitter. Hollow. A couple of months. I ran a hand down my face, trying to grasp the scale of it all. Every conversation. Every joke. Every moment he looked me in the eye, knowing I was living in a lie. Why didn't you tell me? Silence. I could almost hear him searching for an excuse. But there wasn't one. Cole. It wasn't my business. Not your business? I nearly dropped the phone. I was your damn friend. I didn't want to ruin your life. I closed my eyes. You didn't want to ruin my life? Yeah. But you let her do it. The ringing in my ears was deafening. Everything I thought I knew, everything I trusted, it was all a lie. I had expected her to betray me, but I never thought he would. You looked at me, I said, my voice dangerously even. You knew I trusted you, that I thought of you as family. Cole, and this whole time, you let me stand beside her, talk about her, love her, while she was sleeping with someone else. He exhaled, long and heavy. Man, you don't understand. I let out a short, sharp laugh. You're right. I don't understand. My feet moved on their own. I stepped toward the mirror, staring at my reflection. I didn't see pain. I didn't see myself. Just emptiness. You chose them, Dan. Not me. Cole. You chose them. Silence. He didn't argue. Because he knew I was right. I didn't say another word. I ended the call, turned off my phone, sank onto a chair, elbows resting on my knees, and stared into the darkness in front of me. Now, there was no one. I didn't belong here anymore. There was nothing left to hold me back. I sat on the bed, running my hands down my face. My head was clear, but something inside me still scratched at the edges. Yesterday, it ended. The court session lasted less than an hour. Signatures, formalities, a few questions from the judge, her silent stare as the lawyer read the final decision. I was the first to walk out. I didn't even look at her. Mia was no longer my wife. I thought it would bring relief. But now, sitting in this dimly lit room, I felt nothing. I had one. So why didn't it feel like victory? I knew she would come. That's why I wasn't surprised when I heard the knock at the door. I opened it, because I wanted to see her one last time. She stood on the threshold, thin, fragile. Not the woman I once knew. Or maybe she was. Maybe I was just seeing her differently now. She searched my face, as if trying to find something familiar. Are you happy now? I said nothing. You wanted this, right? For me to disappear? Still, I said nothing. She clenched her fingers into a fist, exhaled. Cole. I shut the door, right in front of her face. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. My phone vibrated on the table. Dan. I didn't check the screen. I just picked up the phone, scrolled through my contacts, found his name. Delete? Yes. I closed my eyes, exhaled. Then I found Mia's number. Delete? Yes. I stared at the empty call log. A list of people who no longer existed. I turned. The suitcase sat by the wall, half-packed. Beside it, a ticket. Another city. Another life. I hadn't bought it yet. I hadn't zipped up the suitcase. But now, I knew I would. I stepped onto the balcony, inhaling the crisp, cold air. The past was behind me. All that was left was to take the first step into the future.